Welcome to the second edition of the Translating Europe Forum Newcomers Fair. My name is Riikka HIETAKORPI, and I will be your host this afternoon. I am a translator myself, working for the European Commission. At the moment, I work as a language officer at the Commission representation in Finland, and I'm joining you from the northernmost capital in the EU, Helsinki. We have had an amazing Translating Europe forum so far, full of insightful conversations on this year's theme, which is Quality Matters. You can rewatch all the sessions of the previous 2.5 days on our YouTube channel, Translating for Europe. I think you should see the link in the chat as I speak. All the sessions of this Newcomers Fair will also appear there on Monday next week. This afternoon is dedicated especially to you, students, aspiring translators, and anyone who is curious about a career in the language industry. We have some 1,000 people registered from almost 80 countries all over the world. We are now in the plenary session, which you have entered from the event lobby. Very soon, after I go through the program for today and tell you about our house rules, we will welcome our first speaker. He is Daniel Šebesta, who will deliver his keynote on Linguists in the late 2020s, Mindset and Skills for Success. After Daniel's talk, we'll have a short break, and then we'll move on to our first set of breakout sessions. You can choose between a session about video game localization with Tamara Tirjak and Marianne Kabat, or a session on transcreation of global advertisements with Claudia Benetello. These sessions will become active at 3:15 Brussels time, and you can enter them from the lobby of the event. If you want to, you can change from one session to another by simply leaving the session, which brings you back to the lobby, and there you can join the other sessions. And after the first round, we will have another short break, and we'll see you again at 4:15 Brussels time for the second set of breakout sessions. This time you can choose if you want to hear about a translator's leap into the translation technology world, presented by Randy Scansani, or how to market your services on LinkedIn, led by Kelsey Frick. Before we get started, here are our house rules. Your microphones are muted and your cameras are switched off, so you can't use your mic to ask questions. You can use the chat for conversation, but if you have any questions for our speakers, please use the Q&A feature. You can find the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom window, and if you can't see it, just click on the 3 dots, which says More, and you can find it there. You can upvote the questions you like, and we'll answer the most popular ones during the Q&A at the end of each presentation. We ask you to keep your comments relevant to the topic and not to post any commercial pitches or any insulting comments. But now, let's begin. Daniel Šebesta will talk about the challenges newcomers face when building their client base and reputation in 2025, and how to navigate pricing, tools, and working alongside AI in the modern translation industry. Please, Daniel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Riikka, for the kind introduction. Hello, everyone, and welcome. It's great to see so many of you joining today's session. This block is all about you if you are new to the profession, and I am delighted and honored to be able to kick off this afternoon lineup of learning and inspiring discussions. Before we jump in, do me a small favor to get the conversation going. Tell me and tell everyone in the chat, and that's different from the Q&A box, like Riikka said. Thank you for the reminder. Where are you joining from? Tell us so we know who's in the room to make this online event a little more personal. Mention your city, country, continent, university, whatever you feel comfortable sharing. I know a lot of you have already done that because I asked in a message in the chat. but keep the messages coming. And while you're at it, maybe add one more thing. Are you still studying? Have you just graduated? Are you already doing some work in translation or another language-related area? And I'll look at the chat very briefly. And as I suspected, we have people from all over the world, Hong Kong, Croatia, South America, of course, many European countries. Fantastic. I'm seeing people at different stages of their careers too, from many different places. That is something I love about the language industry. It's global by definition. We all work with words, but we live in entirely different worlds. Let's look at the slides as I speak, and let's be honest and calibrate the expectations here. You're entering this industry at one of the most fascinating, but also most confusing times you could imagine. You've probably heard 100 times or more, AI is changing everything. And if you've studied translation or applied linguistics or something similar in the past few years, you've probably also heard that maybe your work will become obsolete by the time you are done with your program. What a great motivational message, right? As you try to wrap up your studies, which are hard enough to begin with. So let's start from there, from this tension between excitement about the opportunity and the uncertainty about the looming threats. Because here is the truth. You're not entering a dying profession, but you are entering a transforming one. And a deep transformation is always messy in the middle. Whenever I speak with students, newcomers, but also more established professionals, there's one question that keeps coming up. Will AI replace me? It is an understandable question. Tools like DeepL or ChatGPT can produce fairly usable translations in seconds. And they are often good enough for everyday communication for various purposes, actually. So it's natural to wonder where that leaves the humans, the aspiring experts. But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the real question is, where and how exactly do I create value in a world where machines can already do so much? Maybe that's a better, more productive lens, because it shifts the focus from fear to strategy. None of this is new. I want to remind you of a prediction from a while back that is in line with some of the narrative you are hearing today. Back in 2016, this guy here is Henry Liu, then president of the International Federation of Translators, FIT. I wonder how many of you actually knows what that is. And Henry Liu made headlines in translator land back then when he said at a translator conference that there will be no translators in 2025. Now, that was a bold claim, wasn't it? Especially to make at a translator conference. But here we are, it's 2025. You're listening to me talking about translation at the Translating Europe Forum of all places, organized by the European Commission's DGT, one of the biggest bodies of professional translators in the world. You're training for translation. You're hoping to get established in translation. So it seems that translators still exist. The question is then, was Henry Liu wrong? Or are we just behind the times somehow? Well, I think Henry was not wrong. There was, of course, nuance to his presentation. He wasn't predicting extinction. He was predicting a deep transformation. He was saying essentially that the old definition of a translator would no longer apply. And on that point, I believe he was spot on. I know 2016 can feel a little like prehistory on your scale if you're still in a university program at this time. But think about what happened in 2016 and what has happened since. Neural machine translation moved from research labs into everyday life in 2016, 2017. Google Translate and DeepL quickly became some of the favorite services on the internet. Not necessarily among translators at first, but certainly among the general public. And then a few years later came generative AI, large language models like what we all know these days, GPT, Claude, Gemini, DeepSeek, trained to produce fluent text on demand. And for many translation buyers, translation suddenly felt instant and free. For professionals, that was naturally a bit of a shock. I remember the mood back in 2016, 2017, which is the atmosphere that this claim on the screen stems from. Half panic, half curiosity. Some translators quit sooner or later. Some experimented with the new possibilities. Some complained loudly. And some quietly made the tools work for them. And today, with generative AI, as we know it today, we see more or less the same dynamic repeat. And yes, this is an AI-generated image that you guys will be looking at for a little while now. But here's the key point for newcomers like yourselves. You're starting in the middle of it. You don't have to unlearn 10 or 20 years of habits that did not involve technology, let alone AI. You get to design your workflows, your habits, your preferences, more or less from scratch, without legacy burdens. And that is a huge advantage if you approach it with the right mindset. And let me add, change isn't only about technology. If you follow the news these days, AI is in your face all the time. So you would be forgiven for thinking that that is the sole driver of all change. We also like to blame AI for many things, especially the negative developments. It's convenient, it's easy. But we need to remember that we're also living through a myriad of other changes that are hugely significant. Client behavior, buyer behavior, consumer behavior has changed post-COVID enormously. Remote teams, shorter timelines, asynchronous collaboration in the online space, more just in time, more good enough right now for low impact content, for instance. How many just horrible product listings have you seen online in e-commerce recently? And did they prevent you from buying the product? There are also supply chain shocks. Think rare earths, China, chips, hardware delays ripple into software releases, and those ripple into documentation schedules. Localization windows shrink or shift as a result. Automotive companies pause production. Surely that has an impact on their translation needs too. Wars and geopolitics, shifting front lines and borders, international sanctions that change overnight. refugee flows that change housing and labor markets, and the language needs in schools, hospitals, public services around you. Tariffs and trade friction, they affect where companies launch first, which markets companies stop shipping to entirely. They affect which languages will get priority and which will not be needed at all. They affect how price-sensitive buyers are. And then there is the content explosion. Producing content in the source language now has become infinitely easy. User-generated content is everywhere. The volumes are massive. The average shelf life of content is shrinking. Much of it is slop, and expectations around speed are just unforgiving. And yes, AI is a big driver in much of that, but it kind of rides on top of these macro shifts that we should also keep in mind. So your career strategy has to read the whole picture, not just the tech headlines. And for your strategy, let's start with mindset, because I believe it's more important than any specific tool or technique. Success often depends less on perfect output 100% of the time and more on how you handle imperfection. You need to manage failure in a productive way, and you will fail throughout your career. There will be business strategies that won't work. There will be clients that will vanish. There will be AI prompts that misfire. The goal isn't to avoid failure. The goal is to recover quickly from a failure and to learn the right lesson for the next round. Fail fast and learn even faster. Try the new tool today, try the new workflow, put that weird new job title on your LinkedIn profile and see what sticks. And here is the comforting part. Nobody knows exactly where this industry is going and what it will look like a few years from now. Anyone promising you a full roadmap is guessing. Don't believe anyone who says it will be all AI in 2 years' time. But also don't believe anyone who says that this technology wave is a fade and that clients will realize the limitations of automation and go back to trustworthy human vendors. Either extreme is wishful thinking. We're all experimenting. Some of us just do it more systematically than others. Now, a lot of people talk about AI as a threat. It certainly is a threat to something, but I prefer to see it as an amplifier. It amplifies weakness and it amplifies strength. If your main value is typing fast in a foreign language, then you definitely are in trouble. Because guess what? AI types faster in that language. If your main value, on the other hand, is judgment, critical thinking, clarity of thought, and true creativity, then AI makes those strengths more visible. I use AI all the time. Often it writes better first drafts than I do. First drafts of translations, first drafts of marketing copy, research papers, presentations. But that doesn't make me redundant. It makes me faster at getting to what actually matters, to the thinking, to the tone, to the nuance, to the curating of sources to draw on. AI compensates for our weaknesses so we can double down on our strength. That's the new equation, and more on that in detail later. In turbulent times like these, we often hear about resilience. Be resilient, right? Be resilient doesn't mean be tough. Resilience is recovery speed. If a client disappears because they decide to use DeepL or ChatGPT for everything, fine, not much you can do about that. Take a day, maybe 3, and then move on. Figure out what they're doing with those tools and why, and learn from it. And then go find clients for whom you can still add business value, and maybe package your translation work, linguistic work as something slightly different next time to help the next client see that value. Mental resilience is not pretending everything is fine. It is acknowledging that sometimes things aren't fine and still showing up to play the next round with a lesson learned along the way. You will often hear AI can never replace human creativity. Sounds reassuring, right? But that's not a strategy, because most content in the world today is far from creative at the source, in the source language. It's routine, it's repetitive, it's predictable, and machines will keep eating that part first. The trick isn't to chant human is better across the board. It's to deliberately choose the battles where the human is necessary. Work where judgment, emotion, human traits, and consequences matter. And you need to build your skills around those. Here's another uncomfortable truth. Clients don't actually buy translation. No client ever fantasizes about having a translation. It's no client's dream to have their online catalog of products translated and proofread by 2 certified translators with a combined 40 years of experience. Just no. No one goes to a restaurant because they have no food at home. No one hires a portrait painter because their phone doesn't have a camera. And similarly, no one hires a translator because they want to know what an article says and they want to have a translation. Clients don't buy translation. They buy results. They most likely want copy that sells in another country. They want a marketing campaign that propagates their brand image in another language, in a different demographic, that adds a touch of luxury, perhaps. They want a top-ranking website that touches an audience the client wouldn't be able to speak to otherwise. They want press releases that make readers act in a certain way. They want users to understand a manual and use their device without having to call support. They want legal certainty, they want brand consistency, they want fewer headaches. They want to achieve that with language. And if they could achieve that without language and without linguists, they certainly would go for that option. So translation is a means to that end. And as Renato Beninato says, translation is free. Anyone can get something translated instantly these days. What clients actually pay for is for someone to help them navigate and reduce complexity, so they don't have to think about tone and formatting and terminology and risk themselves. Often all of these at once in an unfamiliar language and in an unfamiliar locale. So that means your job is not just to produce words, it's to remove friction. And that's what makes you valuable. So as you try to get established and market your services, you need to focus more on these outcomes. For example, by featuring outcomes that your existing clients, if you have some, achieved with the help of your work. And focus less on the features, industry jargon like TEP, 4 Eyes principle, the qualifications, the certifications, X, Y, and Z that you might bring to the table. Some clients care about such fine print, and it's good to have something to back up your claims in your back pocket. But in my experience, increasingly many clients don't care about the features as much. No matter what features you do bring to the table, it is always important to present translation or any language service as a revenue enabler, first and foremost, and as a cost last. So be careful how you structure your conversations with potential customers, how you structure your profiles, your marketing, your websites, your quotes, how you talk to your customers, how you phrase what you do, because the story you tell really matters. Now, I am aware that it might be hard to showcase the value of translation work because translation done well is kind of invisible, right? But that's why we're language and communication experts, to convey this message of value that we bring. And there are still areas where we can add visible value that makes a difference in many contexts for many buyers and employers. Advanced judgment, highly nuanced language, cultural knowledge, a lived physical experience of the real world that language models can hardly have, intimate familiarity with a target audience, and client rapport based on empathy and trust. Because the free solutions, if we accept that translation is free, come with a risk premium attached. And getting it right the first time is quite essential in many high consequence scenarios for high risk documents with high visibility and high impact copy. But it would be foolish to think that everything our clients produce in their source language is of such a high risk profile that they will pay for a human-centric workflow to have it translated into just about every language they might want to use in their business. So translators in low stakes scenarios are indeed dying out in 2025. The days of humans in general in low stakes scenarios are possibly numbered, and not just in translation. But for the high risk areas, clients will likely continue to place trust in people. We're probably still relatively far away from the moment when people will be willing to place their trust entirely in tools, because trust is earned over time. So that is one thing to look out for as you scout for your first clients or new clients. Hold on to that logic to guide your prospecting. In addition to that, if you're starting your business in language services, be easy to transact with. Clients now literally compare you, a human, to a button. If working with you is slow, unclear, bureaucratic, they're more likely to push the button. So simplify it for them. Have an informative online profile, website, LinkedIn, what have you. Offer a clear timeline, clear price, clear workflow, clear scope of what is included and what isn't. Offer a simple handoff process. Ask for what you need from them once and not 5 times. offer calendar links for calls, offer recorded walkthroughs when that's helpful. When the process friction goes down, the perceived value of the human expert tends to go up. A lot of people in the language industry and elsewhere also worry about security and confidentiality when using technology and AI in particular. But free chatbots on public websites are not the primary way you're going to use AI in your professional work. Today, you can and should use paid enterprise-grade versions that have contractual privacy rules. You can and should use secure API access from professional-grade tools. You can use private cloud deployments. You can also have on-premise models that don't touch the public internet. And no, you do not need 2 PhDs in data science to make a large language model run locally on your computer. Your job is to learn the difference between the professional grade and the public, general public tools, and to reassure your clients. Your narrative can say, in plain language, I use enterprise-grade AI with data never retained for model training. Or for highly confidential content, I work with an on-premise setup. On the other hand, a message that centers around, I avoid AI and you should too, because it's not secure for your data, it's just misleading. It's fear-mongering. The picture is more nuanced than that. Also keep in mind, many of your future clients do not yet exist. Despite wars, tariffs, supply chain shocks, the average new company today and in the future is and will be more global, has or will have more global aspirations than the average company from 10 years ago. New firms often expect to speak multiple languages from pretty much day one these days. Websites, apps, support, selling, cross-border, especially here in multilingual Europe, with less and less friction in doing business across borders. Some future readers of your work also won't even be people. They will be machines. They will be AI agents. Generative engine optimization is a growing field that is worth following. So keep asking yourself, what will I be able to offer to these clients that are not even born yet, metaphorically, as a company, or literally clients that are not even born yet that will be in leadership or decision-making roles 20 years down the line. And also people or clients that are not even people. So don't calibrate your offering today just based on who would have been your client yesterday and what they would have wanted yesterday, or even today. You're not just trying to make it to 2026. You're probably hoping for a career that will span decades in the industry. Now, because generative AI and large language models and small language models are such a general purpose technology, people naturally try to use it for everything. Just like when Apple put a powerful computer in our pockets, a smartphone, an iPhone. It is one thing to do legacy types of work more efficiently. Now, you were able to make phone calls without going to a landline, right? You can also translate not 3,000 words a day, but 10,000. And that's all great. That can be helpful, that brings value. But you can also use this general purpose technology to do better work. You can use the general purpose technology to bridge an experience gap in a short amount of time when you are starting out. You can use AI as a research booster. Use Perplexity to map a new domain quickly. Then verify facts and terms with a short list of the most trusted sources in NotebookLM. Ask ChatGPT what a vague term or an unclear structure might mean in the little bit of context that you have, and then cross-check. You can use AI as a variant generator. You can ask Claude for 5 tone options, not one, and then compare, combine, refine. You can also scout to look for edge cases, like give me 10 ways this copy, this scene, this graphic could go wrong culturally in country X. You can use these same research tools to scout for leads, for potential customers that would benefit from your work. None of that replaces you. All of it amplifies you as someone that reduces complexity for your clients. And what promises an even more sustainable future, in my opinion, is using AI to do things we could never do before, things we wouldn't have thought to do before. To go back to the powerful computer in your pocket analogy, who would have thought before smartphones that we could have Uber and food delivery apps and Tinder and Spotify and Zoom and Duolingo in one device? And I would argue that we are at a similar point in language services. We can already see brand new lines of business, brand new services emerging. Maybe you are or will be involved in collecting and curating training data for future large language models. Maybe you are being asked to evaluate and rank output from different models or with different prompts. Maybe you are being asked to collect voice data that will help power the next generation of AI voice assistants. Maybe you're cleaning up translation memories and building out term bases or even knowledge graphs for use with AI. Maybe you're editing multilingual output generated by AI without any source text, just a prompt. Maybe you are involved in prompt engineering. Maybe AI speech editing is the next opportunity for you. Maybe it is AI dubbing and lip sync for cinematic content that would have previously used subtitles, or that would have previously remained monolingual, or that would have not even been created without AI in the first place. All this work is being done as we speak, and much of it requires linguistic knowledge, linguistic skills, something translators undoubtedly have, even if they have not trained specifically for these tasks. And yet some of these jobs may be going to people who are not linguists, but people who are more willing, who have the open mind to give it a go. So as these new adjacent services where you as a trained linguist or translator can add value are emerging, it is important to position yourself early in those domains. Early as in before somebody else does. And before somebody invents even more technology to fill a potential void. So that's one of your openings. Think of today's landscape as two markets that coexist. The instant market, the low-risk content where good enough is simply good enough, where there are tiny budgets, where machines dominate that market, and humans supervise the workflows very briefly, if at all. and the trusted market, some might say premium market, with high stakes content where judgment and accountability matter, where humans lead and machines assist, where there is a budget and where it's worth your time. Now, you can operate in both of these, but at all times, for every project, you should know which one it is that you're operating in right now and act accordingly. As you probably know, per word pricing is still remarkably common in the language industry. It probably made sense when typing was a significant part of the job, right? But what you sell now is thinking and outcomes. Outcomes of the kind that I discussed earlier, a campaign that works, a campaign that performs, a documentation that reduces support tickets, etc. And you can use 3 practical moves as you strategize and talk to potential clients. Scope the outcome, not only the words. Set the goals. In conversation with a client, you can set a goal like producing social media copy that in German that keeps the premium tone, elicits positive sentiment in audience interactions, and increases views and follows or likes by X%. Tie success to a measurable outcome, in particular for digital content, but not only for that. That is eminently doable. So if you're talking to a client directly rather than through a middleman, ask for access to such metrics. Not everyone will feel comfortable providing them, but some will. Also, offer tiers of service that are differentiated by the level of risk that your client is willing to bear. There can be a basic tier with an off-the-shelf machine translation model and a very quick, light human check of the sections that you identify as high risk, the safety warnings, the legal notices, perhaps. And then there can be a premium tier that will include a curated terminology glossary and a style guide that will be integrated in the prompt for an AI translation, which is then fully post-edited. And of course, anything in between these 2 extremes. Let the client choose their risk appetite, not only speed and price. And understand the business impact. If a launch is worth hundreds of thousands, then your fee doesn't have to be about word count. It's about protecting and enabling that value of the launch in the market. To do that, to be able to price that way, you need to know your client really well. You need to ask them better questions, and technology can help you with that again. You also need to do better research, and technology can help with that again. And of course, you won't win every quote, you won't win every client, and there is no reason why you should, but you might win the right ones. For years, the mainstream advice to newcomers to the professional is specialize. Do not be a jack of all trades that translates medical content in the morning, nuclear engineering at lunchtime, and fashion marketing in the afternoon. And that advice still holds. But I would urge you to be open-minded about what you specialize in and to be ready to pivot whenever necessary, especially if you work with smaller languages or, on the contrary, high resource languages where technology can be expected to move fast. A pivot might be necessary many times during your career. To take it to the extreme, look at specializing in a very niche industry. I know people that do something like the coffee industry. What is your addressable market with the coffee industry? And how vulnerable are you if technology becomes very good in that niche, or if a trade war hits that sector. Also consider your language pair in that equation. English German is one thing, Russian Lithuanian is another, French Arabic is yet another if you live and work in Europe. Would you rather be a hyper specialized expert with tons of knowledge and little to no work, or more of a nimble generalist that learns and pivots quickly to adapt to the changing needs of the market? To keep up with the changing needs, you need to build learning habits that work for you. Continuing education was always important in a knowledge profession, but it is absolutely imperative now. Whatever university program you are in or have been in, you cannot expect to come out knowing everything you need to know today, let alone into the future. So set a cadence you can keep up with even as your paid work ramps up. Set aside a few minutes every day to experiment with a new tool that could be useful to your work, even if you don't know yet how. This is not just about different prompts in ChatGPT and a new CAT tool. Have you checked out HeyGen? Have you played with AI voices? Have you seen any of the dubbing platforms that keep cropping up? Set aside a few hours every week to read up on the latest from an industry that you're already working in or where you're trying to get a foot in the door. Again, technology can help you. Perplexity can help you curate the sources and provide a digest. NotebookLM can turn the insights into a podcast for you to listen to during your commute. Make a point of going to an in-person conference every year for the learning and for the networking. And of course, networking isn't just translator meetups. It's where language meets something else. Video games, which you will hear about next at this conference today, longevity, climate tech, fintech, trade policy, industries where the money and the growth are and will likely be in the future. Now, to keep the chat alive, can you just name a domain that you're curious about, that you would like to explore? And once you have identified that domain, go online and find 3 people that work in that domain that you want to follow, that you want to ask a question, that you want to offer some help if you can. Opportunities follow people who are easy to find and pleasant to work with. So in closing, before we open this to questions and I invite questions in the Q&A window, I see a lot of activity in the chat, which is great. But if you're posting questions in the chat, they might get lost there. So please use the Q&A window. And in closing, I'm going to say a few things. Cultivating a mindset that will be helpful to your business outcomes is not something I can give you a step-by-step set of instructions for. Times change. Each of you has different strengths and weaknesses and goals, but there are a few general tips. Embrace change, embrace uncertainty, embrace technology. Do not dwell on what you learned at school, especially do not listen to grumpy translators reminiscing the good old days, because the good old days are not coming back. Look for ways to thrive in the good present days, to thrive going forward with the cards that are laid out now. And hierarchies are being redefined with transformations. And this is a fantastic time to seize opportunities. Experiment. have a positive self-image, a positive but also well-informed and up-to-date attitude to your own skills and how and where they can actually add value to solve your clients' real-world problems. And don't forget about the clients of the future. Have an abundance mindset. If you're not familiar with the concept, look it up. It's quite powerful. Be willing to invest in the business that you're likely building up. Get the tools, learn the tools, get your name out there where it matters. Pay for that ChatGPT Perplexity software subscription for a few months. Pay to attend that conference that costs money and use the FaceTime with industry leaders to your advantage. Accept that you don't know it all and that technology can help you overcome that. And know that being displaced often comes from being too slow to adapt, from being and becoming complacent and passive. You can take an active part in shaping your business, your tools, the entire industry by being open to change. Being open to change is largely a choice. So that's a bit of your playbook, not glamorous perhaps, but hopefully effective. And I'm going to leave you with this quote. Are you still just adapting to change, or are you ready to design what's next? And before we go to Q&A, just one last chat nudge that I have for all of you. Just type one skill or tool that you commit to test in the next 7 days. One thing, something doable, something relatively easy that you can commit to. And I will take a look at that, and then I will go to the Q&A window. I see a lot of people saying CAT tools. That is a good start, yes. CAT tools are very helpful in translation, but do go beyond that. Neural MT training, okay. Very good, very good. All right. Small steps repeated can beat big plans that are postponed. So if you're serious about staying in this business that you're entering for years to come, go a step further and take an active role in shaping the change that your chosen industry is facing. Experiment with what's new. See for yourself what works and what doesn't. And I hope to see what you guys build. So thank you for listening. And let me look at the questions now. All right. So we have a question from Bernal. If more people make less money, less products and services are sold, this is happening already and accelerating. The AI promise is a lie, but it is being used to undermine wages, jobs, and small companies. Big tech takes it all. That's your world, Daniel, because you sell tech too. I have to disappoint you, Bernal. I don't sell tech really, but I try to do the best to make it work for me. I actually sell language services. Let me look at the next question from Remy. How can past changes in the translation industry help this current brave new world realities where we can maintain value and employment? I think the language industry, with its past changes, like what we saw in 2016 with the onset of neural machine translation, can actually teach us useful lessons about adaptation and showcasing the value that we still bring despite technology that can do a lot, right? So the circumstances are different, but the underlying principles have not changed all that much from the past periods of change in the language industry. Then we have another question: how can you build a lasting network in this industry? Well, it's a never-ending process. I've been in this industry for over 20 years, and I can assure you that I do not know everyone. I also don't know everything, but going to conferences is a great way to start building a network, and you are at a conference right now, so make the most of it. And I try to nudge people to use the chat. That is a form of networking. You might see a comment from somebody that says something interesting that catches your attention, and you might follow up with them. So make sure you note down their name, you look them up on LinkedIn or elsewhere on the internet, and that is a form of networking, and those are connections that might lead to something if you put some work in them. Go to in-person conferences too. I suppose some of you went to the in-person Translating Europe forum that preceded this online module. So that is another form of networking that can last to that can lead to a lasting network for the rest of your career. And then, of course, for the business networking, do go to the events where your clients hang out. You need to know what they're talking about. You need to know what their pain points are with technology, with the language services that they already use, etc. Then we have a comment from Chris Durbin. Might give you a few no-goes, say 3 to 4 tips on definitely do not do this. It would be professional suicide. Well, I would not try to dissuade customers from using technology at this point in time. It would be counterproductive. It would portray you in a negative light. It would show that you're not necessarily keeping up with the times. Instead, focus on how to make it work. Now we have another question. When it comes to AI, how would you advise to best implement it in the work you deliver? I try to aim for a seamless integration. Any level of friction switching between windows, between different apps, different platforms is a form of friction. If you can avoid that, if you can integrate AI into tools that you already work in, then that can lead to a better implementation. And I know it's 3 o'clock, but I will look at the final question that just got in. What about the environmental sustainability of AI? It is very energy consuming resource. And on the other hand, the most used AI programs are environmentally unethical. On the other hand, they're the most functional. So how does one cope with that? Yes, AI consumes a lot of energy, a lot of water, a lot of natural resources. So does an internet search. So does cloud storage. And if you can replace 30 Google searches with one Perplexity search, then maybe the gap in energy consumption and resource consumption isn't all that great. And I think we have to look for a solution here. We have to look for cleaner energy sources more than ways to avoid using AI. That would be my solution to this. And if Riikka tells us that we can still go for another few minutes, we have one more question. Any advice for a beginner or entry-level translators or translation students? Well, you already are benefiting from an advice somebody gave you. You registered for this conference, and you will hear several more inspiring talks about game localization, etc. And you have a number of networking opportunities here, so make use of them. And that is something beginners and more established professionals need to do. So thank you all very much, and I will hand it over to Riikka.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for that insightful talk. Next up, we will have our first set of breakout sessions. You can choose between video game localization by Tamara Tirjak and Marian Kabat, or transcreation of global advertisements by Claudia Benetello. But first, it's time for a short break. Please be back at 1:15 to join the session you'd like to attend. I remind you that you can watch the recordings of the other parallel sessions on our YouTube channel early next week. See you after the break.